What's your favorite blade steel to find on a knife under $70? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And if you've got a blade steel in mind that you can find on a knife in that price range, smack the like button, and on the way down, let me know in the comment section down below which steel it is. Today, we're talking shop on this Kubey Hyde, a knife lent to me by a viewer who goes by EDC on Instagram. Please give him a follow on Instagram if you use that platform. It is because of him that I can make this video today. So we've had this knife in our possession for the last month or so. And in that time, I've had a chance to carry it. I've had a chance to put it in my pocket, to fidget with it, to answer all the tough questions. And if you couldn't tell by now, this is another episode of Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives like this Kubey Hyde to give you some context so that you know if it's a knife that deserves a spot in your pocket or in your EDC rotation. Here's how it works. Grail or Garbage consists of 5 categories. Those categories are materials, ergonomics, fidget factor, the lock, and fit and finish. Each category is worth a max of 10 points. And at the end, we'll add up all the scores, do a tiny bit of math, and place it on our leaderboard, which looks like this. And once we do, we'll finally know, is the Kubey Hyde a Grail or is it garbage? With so many great options that have come out in the last couple of years, under $70, it can be difficult finding the right one. Sometimes there can be just way too many options. So I hope to use this ranking as a way to offer even more context to you. And if you get halfway through the video and you find that you're enjoying it, do yourself a favor and make sure to hit subscribe. Let's start off with the first category for the Kubey Hyde. The first category is materials. Now, materials is, the composition of what makes up the knife, but it's also weighed against 2 things. And the first thing is the cost, and the second thing is availability. We'll start with availability. These are available. I will make sure to link these down below. If you decide that you want to give one of these a shot, it will be linked below. It will be an affiliate link. Whether or not you choose to click on it is entirely up to you. The second thing is cost. The good news is that these run about $56, which means that they're highly attainable and also affordable. What do you get for $56? You get G10 handle scales, 14C28N on the blade, a stamped steel pocket clip, and a single-sided captive pivot running on bearings. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, how do I feel about those materials for the price of $56? I honestly think that it's pretty good. In this price range, you're going to see a lot of D2, you're going to see a lot of 9CR, 13 MOV, and while I don't necessarily hate those other blade steel materials, I don't necessarily love them either. And 14C, on the other hand, is a step above those other budget steel materials. If we can normalize using 14C for all budget knives as a minimum, I would love that. And if you would vote for that, make sure you hit the like button. In this case, we do have the G10 handle scales, and they're nicely textured. They're not super aggressive. And it's a good feeling knife as well. But if you want to hear more about that, make sure to stick around for ergonomics, which is coming up next. For materials, this is right in line with what I like to see in this price range. You get a great user steel. 14C is well rounded out in all the properties. It's going to take a pretty decent edge. It's not going to be terribly hard to sharpen. It's going to be, at the very least, somewhat stainless. And it's going to hold that edge for a decently long time. So those are all decent. And for that reason, I'm going to be giving the Kubey Hyde an 8 out of 10 for materials. Next up, let's talk about the ergonomics. How does it feel in the hand? This is quite obviously an EDC knife, or at least that's what it's meant to be. So having good ergonomics is important. Now, they did play it safe on the ergonomic side. They didn't do anything flashy, no crazy cutouts, nothing. This is kind of candy bar style ergonomics, but it's kind of like a choose your own grip, like like the old choose your own story books that they used to have, you know, when people read books. If you remember those, hit the like button. But it does really allow you a lot of flexibility as the user. It's great in an ice pick grip. It's going to be good in a pole cut grip. It's going to be good in a saber grip and for those draw cuts. And you do have some jimping as well as a finger cutout that also doubles as a sharpening choil. So there's nothing bad there. How about the pocket clip? Well, with most stamped pocket clips, it is noticeable in the hand. And that's kind of where I wish that they had put a little bit more in there, maybe made it a, you know, a $60 knife and given us like at least an aluminum, you know, milled clip, or just redesigned this stamped clip, because while it's not a huge hot spot, it is noticeable. And the more you think about it, the more you'll notice it. And that's just a vicious cycle to get stuck in. There is a spot for a lanyard if that is your thing. It's not necessarily my thing, and you can get a full 4-finger grip on here with large to extra large size hands. With extra large size hands, you might be pushing it, but for most people, their hands aren't going to be falling off the back end of these scales. It's not amazing. It's not hand meltingly good. When you make a size fits all, it's going to fit all, but it's not going to fit all perfectly. And so they did play it safe. And while I have no issues with the general ergonomics on here, it is what it is. It's going to be getting a 6 out of 10 for ergonomics. Now we've got to talk about the fidget factor. Fidget factor is so important because it's more than just how much do you want to play with it. Although that is, you know, the main thing for me. Fidget factor encompasses things like the pivot. It encompasses the lock as well as the detent. And all of those things are important for deployment and enjoyment. Deployment and enjoyment. Maybe that's what I should rename this section. The detent on here is not amazing. It's not super light. It's also not super heavy. It's, you know, it's somewhere in the middle. You can flick it out with the top flipper, and notice how I said that it is a top flipper, not a front flipper. This is a top flipper. It's not going to be difficult to deploy at all. You also have this Spyderco-esque deployment hole that works rather well. And that's that. It is fun to play with. The action, while it is running on bearings, the action is not super smooth. But, you know, at the $56 price point, I'm absolutely okay with that. It is fun to fidget with because, at least for me, I love reverse flicking. And the top flipper is nice as well. With the fidget factor, it's not amazing, but it's better than average. I'll sum it up. It's going to be a 7 out of 10 for fidget factor. Now let's talk about the lock. It's a liner lock. As far as locks are concerned, I don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of time on here. It's a liner lock. The improvements that I would have loved to have seen is more access to that liner right there. They jimped it when they should have crowned it. The Best Techman Dundee has a crowned liner lock, and I absolutely love the way that feels to engage and disengage. It's very buttery, smooth, and, you know, it doesn't leave any issues with your thumbs. You know, in this case, it's not that this is super uncomfortable. It's just that I personally would have preferred a crowned liner lock. How's the lockup, you might ask? It's sitting there right around, I'd say 25%. So definitely not bad. There is no blade play up, down, left, or right, and that's good. There is no pivot lash, so that's good. And as far as how centered it is, Kubey does a pretty good job of making sure that their blades are centered on closing. So all in all, the lock is a liner lock. It's not special. It's a liner lock. And this is going to serve most people's purposes. And for those reasons, it's going to get a very typical 7 out of 10 for the lock. And lastly, let's talk about the fit and finish. Fit and finish is more than just how well manufactured it is. It's also about the design. And the Kubey Hyde is actually a pretty cool design. I like the fact that it's this leaf-shaped spear point, drop point shape. It's going to be very useful for cuts. It's going to be a very EDC friendly type of knife. I wouldn't put this in my display case, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have some kind of aesthetic appeal to it. I like the fact that we have a deployment hole there. That's cool. I like the fact that they put Kubey on the pivot, but I do not necessarily like that they put it on the pivot and on the blade. We got it in one of these two places. We don't need it in both. And we know who built it because we bought it, right? Okay, now that we can agree on that, please get rid of it either on the blade or on the pivot. We do not need it in both places. I'm halfway surprised that they didn't also try to put it on the pocket clip. On the other side, it says CM Designs. This is a CM design, but it is a single-sided captive pivot, so I've got to give them some points for that. The clip is deep carry, so it's going to fit really well in the pocket. Did I mention that this is a very EDC-specific knife? They did mill out and skeletonize the liners, and so that's nice, and they are using barrel spacers, aka standoffs, which are not my favorite, but I'm okay with an open back design. The overall design is not blowing my socks off, to be honest with you, but the crowd that I think this really appeals to is those who want a solid EDC knife that has a couple different deployment options, that's just going to be a good EDC knife and easy to replace if it gets damaged, lost, or stolen. And for all of those reasons, it's going to be getting a 7 out of 10 for fit and finish. So let's go ahead and sum it all up. For materials, it's an 8. Ergonomics is a 6. Fidget Factor is a 7. The lock is a 7. And fit and finish is also a 7. If we add all of those up, it comes in at a 35 out of 50. Now, at 35 onward, it's at the very least a high recommend. So could I highly recommend this? Absolutely. I think that everyone should have a couple knives like this in their collection so that they can have something they can throw in the bag. You know, put in your carry-on, or excuse me, put in your checked baggage when you travel on an airplane. This is going to be a perfect knife to take in your checked baggage, because if you lose your baggage, it's really not going to be hard to replace this. Some people would say, oh, I'm fine, you know, taking my $100, $150. But, you know, you get diminishing returns when you're on a trip. And I think that something like that, something like this Kubey Hyde really shines in those types of scenarios. You know, if you're someone that beats on their knives, this is going to be a very good option. And that's why it's a high recommend. I think that it's a very good EDC knife. And overall, I was surprised by how much I liked it, because the budget range right now is crowded with really good knives. You tell me in the comment section down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Either way, I'd love to hear from you. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, boo-hoo, there's a button for you too. And if you watched this long, absolutely consider subscribing. I'm Rollshambo. I'll catch you on the flip side.